Hey everyone, and welcome to the Zone of Tech. I'm Daniel, and it's Thursday. There we go, it's Thursday. Or Friday, depending on where you live. Which means that exactly a week from today, Apple is going to have another event, another keynote. Wait, didn't I have one in September? Yeah, they did, and they actually announced 3 different products. They announced the iPhone 6, the iPhone 6 Plus, and the Apple Watch. And yeah, they did have the Apple Pay as well. But this time they are going to announce something else. So let's take a look and see at what Apple may or may not announce next week, October 16th, at their keynote event. So, enjoy the video. So Apple has already sent out the invites for this event with a message, "It's been way too long," which definitely stays towards a product which hasn't been updated in a while. What could that product be? Well, one option would be the iPod Classic. Yeah, the iPod Classic. So in case you don't know, the iPod Classic hasn't been updated since 2007.
We have new iPod Classics, and this is what they look like.
Yeah, 2007. That's basically 7 years. And last month, in September, right after the Apple event, they've actually discontinued the iPod Classics. So who knows, we might see an updated iPod Classic. Let's hope so. Then option number 2 would be a redesigned, a brand new Mac Mini, which once again hasn't been updated since 2012. So yeah, Mac Mini, it's about damn time. Another option would be the Apple TV, which hasn't been updated since 2012. Although I don't see Apple just holding an event for an Apple TV release. I don't see Apple doing that. So it's either one of those 3, so the Apple TV, the Mac Mini, or the iPod Classic, or who knows, it might actually be not a product, but a feature. So in case you don't know, the iPhone 5S was the first iPhone, the first Apple device to feature a Touch ID sensor. Basically a fingerprint reader in the home button. Now the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus, well, they both have a fingerprint reader. But the iPads, the iPad Air, and the iPad Mini 2, although they've been released after the iPhone 5S, well, they don't feature a fingerprint reader. Which means that the iPad Air 2 and the iPad Mini 3, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, will definitely feature a fingerprint reader. So that might be the thing that it's been way too long since it's been updated. Who knows? And finally, another option would be a brand new iPod lineup, because the iPods haven't been updated for quite a while. Actually, the iPod Touch hasn't been updated since 2012. So yeah, a brand new iPod lineup. It's about damn time. So there you go, these are the options for the message, for the "it's been way too long" message. But to be honest, I would put my money on an updated Mac Mini. So having clarified the title, what's the event going to be focused on? So the September event was focused on the iPhones, and then we had the Apple Watch as well, and this one is going to be focused on the iPads and the Macs. And we also have a possibility of seeing new iPods, because once again, we haven't seen any new iPods for quite some time, basically since 2012. Now, in terms of the iPods, to be honest, I have no idea what they're going to do with the iPod Classic. I have no idea what they're going to do with the iPod Shuffle or with the iPod Nano. In terms of the iPod Touch, expect to see an iPhone 6-like iPod Touch, so basically a 4.7-inch iPod Touch with a fingerprint reader. Most probably the A8 CPU and 1GB of RAM. So yeah, an updated iPod Touch, which will most probably look like the iPhone 6, minus the phone capabilities. Now, in terms of the iPads, expect to see an updated iPad Air, just call it the iPad Air 2, and an updated iPad Mini, just call it the iPad Mini 3. Now, in terms of the specs, both the iPad Air 2 and the iPad Mini 3 will have really similar specs. Actually, they might even have identical specs, because last year's iPad Air 1 and iPad Mini 2, well, they basically had the exact same specs, minus, they had some display differences. But other than that, same 1GB of RAM and same A7 CPU last year. So expect to see the A8 CPU and, who knows, hopefully 2GB of RAM, maybe just in the iPad Air, who knows, but yeah, expect to see that. Now, the big difference will be in terms of the design. Now, I'm not so sure about the Mini, but the Air will definitely feature a brand new design. So expect to see a much thinner design than the iPad Air, something similar to the iPhone 6. And just like the iPhone 6, the iPad Air 2 has been heavily leaked. From mock-ups to actual parts, they all hint to this thinner, all-new design. With the iPhone 6 like recessed volume buttons, rounded edges, as well as the introduction of the Touch ID sensor, which I mentioned before, on both the Air and the Mini, the first for the iPads. Now, there have also been some hints towards a Retina HD display in the new iPads. So yeah, expect to see an even higher resolution display, even better contrast, and even better viewing angles, and even better outdoor viewing experience. Something really similar to what you get with the iPhone 6. So that's pretty much all we can expect, at least in terms of the iPads. So what about the Macs? Now, in terms of the Macs, we'll most likely see an updated lineup of the Retina MacBook Pros, with updated CPUs and GPUs, and maybe, just maybe, even a price drop. And speaking of the GPU, there's actually a possibility, and I'm not joking about this, there's actually a possibility of Apple including the GTX 980, obviously the mobile version, which is actually really thin. It's a lot thinner than a previous generation. So who knows, Apple might actually include this in the next generation Retina MacBook Pros, which will make a lot of users, including myself, extremely happy. Although I don't think Apple will be doing this, but yeah, there's still a chance, so it was worth mentioning. So apart from the updated MacBook Pro lineup, expect to see brand new iMacs, and by brand new I don't actually mean a brand new design, but brand new models with a Retina display, because yeah, it's about damn time. And Apple has actually started producing 27-inch Retina display panels for their next generation iMacs. 27-inch Retina display will definitely make my day. And apart from this, as I mentioned before, an updated Mac Mini, because the Mac Mini hasn't been updated since 2012. So yeah, expect to see a brand new design and some serious spec bumps, because the current gen Mac Mini, which once again hasn't been updated since 2012, still features the Intel HD 4000, which is absolutely a joke for a 2014 machine, especially a desktop machine. So yeah, brand new Mac Mini coming next week. And then we have the MacBook Air. So in case you don't know, the MacBook Air is Apple's best-selling Mac. It was introduced in 2008 and at that time was the world's thinnest laptop. And because of the MacBook Air, we now have all the Ultrabooks you see on the market right now, including the word Ultrabook. In 2010, they introduced an even thinner MacBook Air, which for the first time featured flash storage instead of the traditional hard drive. And along with it came its smaller brother, the 11-inch Air. But the Air was weak. It was an underpowered, overpriced machine with a pretty bad battery life, and it just didn't get to the consumer's hearts. At least not until 2013, because that's when Apple released the all-new Intel Haswell MacBook Airs. And with that came some insane performance as well as some insane battery life. You can now get up to 12 hours of continuous usage on the 13-inch Air, according to Apple, but some users actually managed to get up to 48 hours, which is absolutely insane. There's actually a world record for this, by the way. And yes, in case you haven't already figured out, the MacBook Air does have the best battery life of any notebooks on the market right now. And in 2014, they dropped the price, like, dramatically. So the 11-inch Air now starts at £750. That's if you're not a student, because if you're a student, you can get it for as low as £600. That's basically the same price as an iPhone 6. So that's really cheap for a computer, especially for a Mac. All of these made the Air not just the best-selling Mac, but the best-selling notebook on the planet as of October 2014. And Apple is clearly aware of that. Reason why they're going to announce the next generation of MacBook Airs most probably next week. So what's going to be different in the new generation of MacBook Air? Well, everything basically. First off, it is going to come with a Retina display, which only the Retina MacBook Pros come with, hence their name. A 12-inch Retina display to be exact. Which means that Apple will either discontinue the current generation 11 and 13-inch MacBook Airs, or they'll simply keep all the MacBook Airs and we'll have an 11, 12, and 13-inch, with obviously a 12-inch being more expensive. Now, apart from the Retina display, the new MacBook Airs are also going to be thinner. And I'm not just talking thin, I'm talking really thin, like impossibly thin. So apparently Apple has just patented a new type of USB called USB Type-C, which is almost as small as a mini USB, not micro USB, but mini USB. So in case you don't know, the thickest part of the MacBook Air is basically as thick or as thin, depending on how you see it, as the USB 3.0. Removing that will allow Apple to go even thinner with the design. And in case you are wondering, yes, they are planning to include an adapter in the box. Now, in terms of the specs, especially the CPU, we have three options. Now, option number one is Intel's new Core M CPU, which is basically a really low voltage CPU, but it's also not as powerful as the current generation Haswell CPU, so I don't see Apple actually doing that, but you know, it's still a possibility. Option number two is quite an interesting one. So option number two implies Apple ditching Intel, like for good, and switching to the Apple A8 or Apple A9 or any in-house CPUs for the MacBook Air. And finally, option number three for the CPU, which I believe is the most likely one, is the new Intel Broadwell CPU. Now, the last two CPU options have a pretty unique advantage, and that is they require no fans, like honestly no fans at all. So again, in case you don't know, the reason why the current generation MacBook Air is thinner at one point and then it becomes thicker as you go up is because of the fan mechanism. Removing that will not only allow for a dramatically thin design, but will also give Apple enough room for a bigger battery, which is going to be a critical requirement because of the all-new Retina display. which obviously consumes more energy. And by the way, they're also planning on removing the clicking mechanism from the trackpad, therefore ditching a lot of stuff in favor for a really thin design, as well as a much bigger battery, which I'm totally fine with. But there you go, that's basically how the next generation MacBook Air will be like. Now, in terms of the release date, Intel is planning on mass releasing the Intel Broadwell CPUs somewhere in mid-2015. Now, as you probably know, Apple has always had a priority with Intel CPUs, which means that, in my opinion, the next generation of MacBook Air will start mass production at the end of 2014 with an imminent 2015 release. And I'm guessing it's gonna be alongside the Apple Watch. So the next gen MacBook Air is almost here, and we might see a preview next week, and if we don't see a preview, it's still coming, and we'll probably see a preview in, I don't know, January, March, February, something like that. But once again, I would put my money on a next week preview with a January or February release. So there you go, this is basically all that Apple is going to announce next week, October 16th at their keynote event. So any one more thing devices?
But there is one last thing I'd like to talk to you about today.
No, at least I don't think so, because there was a one more thing device, and that was basically last month. That was the Apple Watch, so I don't think so. So thank you all for watching this video. Let me know in the comment section down below which was your favorite device I talked about in this video. Let me know in the comment section down below, and also give this video a like if you have enjoyed it, and I'll keep making more videos like this one. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you tomorrow in my next video. Zenotech, signing out. Cheers.